What up? Uncle Benji here. Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be the second in the series of videos, oral history of my collection. It'll be a long, ongoing series. Today you're going to get a two-pack though, and this is actually the two first albums I bought on vinyl in my life. I grew up in a household where my dad had like hundreds of records from the 60s and 70s I would listen to all the time. But by the time I started buying music, in the mid-90s, CDs had taken over. This was, well before I was listening to any digital music or burning CDs. I started buying CDs from BMG, Columbia House, building my CD collection. So all I bought was CDs. Digital stuff came around. I was still buying CDs because I could buy a CD, burn the CD, and have WAV files that I could listen to on my iPod or whatever it was. So I was very invested in CDs. And even though vinyl was always a big part of hip-hop, DJs, used vinyl. Hip-hop artists were still pressing up vinyl through the 90s and early 2000s, but it wasn't nearly the type of scene that it is now. It was a very niche scene. But stuff started to change once streaming services really started to come around, and you had access to all this music for a very low monthly fee. And over time, it started to change my perspective, because I'd always bought all these CDs, and then over time, I was buying less and less CDs, because it's like, well, I can just listen to the digital versions. I don't have to spend this money for, a piece of plastic that I really just wanted to burn the digital files from anyway. I wasn't spending as much money on music, but I had artists that I really loved and wanted to support, wanted to see them continue to make music. And something started happening in the early 2010s, especially like 2012, 2013. Record Store Day started to become a big event here in American record stores, which was like a brand new thing. I think a lot of people were noticing that they weren't spending as much money on music. Streaming was there. We wanted to support art. So there was a big movement towards that. I didn't have a record player at this time. There was still artists that were just on the verge starting to press up vinyl. It wasn't a few years later, we got into like 2015, 2016, we started to see more like niche vinyl releases, like very small quantities, releasing higher prices, making it more of a collector's item. But it was still just at this era, 2012, 2013, just trying to find a way to, find some sort of product that people might want to buy or invest in. So the first artist that got me to take the plunge and buy a record, even though I didn't have a record player to play it on, was Elucid and AM Breakups with Cult Favorite. This album, you can see the material that they used to print it with, the artwork looks really different, from most vinyl releases you see. Has a really cool look to it, really cool artwork on the actual record itself. Elucid at this time had started to work with Billy Woods and Backwoods Studios, but he was still doing his own thing. And this album with AM Breakups was much anticipated for those of us that were plugged into this scene. It was like a year earlier in 2012, they had released a Kingdom mixtape that had multiple tracks with AM Breakups and Elucid just kind of showing off their chops, what they could do. It was a really awesome project and got anyone who was, again, plugged in excited for their full-length project, Cult Favorite. It was a very prescient decision for them to release vinyl for this, because not many people knew Elucid at this time or AM Breakups. Not just to release vinyl, but it's like a 180-gram black vinyl, really high quality release. They saw the future with this. Before, this is before Backwoods had released vinyl in this area. Backwoods had released vinyl earlier years ago, but they had shifted to just really doing CDs through the whole Superchron era. They really weren't releasing vinyl. So this Elucid vinyl, which had a feature from Woods on there, really was a huge thing to start to move some of these artists in that orbit towards thinking about maybe pressing vinyl, another thing that fans might be interested in potentially spending money on. Elucid really does things that I hadn't heard before in rap. A lot of metaphors and perspectives he takes, right from the start, he's rhyming from the perspective of a cult leader, and name drops Daddy Grace, who was a black preacher. It had a huge following in America that I didn't really know the history of, something that I researched subsequently and was really kind of blown away by the parallels that Elucid was able to bring between himself as a rapper and being idolized like a cult leader. There weren't like implicit parallels that he's showing on this track. The more you listen to Elucid, the visuals start to unlock things that weren't there, especially if you pick up on some of these references that he does put in there, because they're very sly. Like, it's not obvious that this is a reference to something. But he has a lot of references hidden in his work if you are paying attention and you know what you're listening for. It's one thing to just like put out a vinyl at this time, but they did really cool things with the record itself. Like at the end of each side of the record, there's like an infinite loop siren sound that I don't really like. I may have another record or two that has an effect like that, but this is definitely one of the only ones. Really something that just kind of adds a little psychedelic flair to this album and makes it a special treat to me. Later in the album, you have a song like Then He Rose, a Christ metaphor, but definitely not a Christian song, but just shows you the level of wordplay that Elucid has. He's not an artist, like when I think of wordplay, he's not like the first artist that comes to mind, because that's not his focus. He's a more with less varied visual writer, but Then He Rose showed how crazy of a writer he can be with the wordplay and the metaphors and stuff that you do not catch on first listen and really pays off the more you listen to this album. You even have a crazy line on here, like he says, the band began to play, and AM Breakups shared with me in an interview I did with Elucid back in the day that the samples at the beginning and into the song, I think it may even been part of the song sample, I'm not sure on that part, but was from the band, like the actual the band, the Canadian band. And Elucid just said that not knowing where those clips were from. So very cool happenings with this album. Then later in the same year, in 2013, is when Woods dropped his first vinyl as a solo artist, which was the Dour Candy vinyl collaborative album with Blockhead. This was a super important album in the history of Backwoods. They had, like I mentioned earlier, vinyl in their earlier era, but it was something they had gone away from, and I didn't know if that would be something they would do again. But as soon as they announced that they were going to do a vinyl, and I think they had a super fan package that came with like a shirt, CD, the vinyl, I think the CD was signed, and all of that was like $55 or something like that. And, this is what the vinyl looked like just still one of the prettiest vinyl that I have in my collection, the original Dour Candy vinyl. It was obviously something that I had to get. And again, with Cult Favorite and as well as this, these records were very limited releases, no more than 300 to 500 per release, and they did not sell out for a long time. This was a different era for Backwoods and for Elucid. They didn't have nearly the fan base they had today. Vinyl was in a different time period, but yeah, I remember these albums like being there well after they were released, very small run for people to be able to purchase if they wanted. It snowballed a lot in the coming years after this. More vinyl was coming out, but it still wasn't stuff that was selling out instantly. It took a while from 2013 for that fan base to build. But there's a lot of things with Dour Candy that I think get overlooked. It's a slept-on album in Wood's catalog. At the time, it was a really groundbreaking album. Wood really took control of it and showed himself in a new way. I mean, History Absolves Me was such a gigantic album with years building toward it, but there was a different kind of freedom with Dour Candy to show who he was as an artist. Like right from the start, he has a sample on the song that comes from this movie, The Dancer Upstairs, that I had never heard of this movie. I didn't know what the sample was from. As soon as I heard it, I recognized Javier Bardem's voice, but found out through, again, an interview I did with Woods back at that time. I was lucky enough during this era to do track-by-track interviews with Elucid and AM Breakups for Cult Favorite, and with Woods for this album. These interviews are no longer on the internet. I may upload them in some format at some point in the future, but you know, it was really cool during that time to get to, you know, spend time, hours-long phone conversations with these guys and really unpack a lot that was out there, because there wasn't a lot of people covering them. There wasn't a lot of people talking to them. So I learned a lot. I learned that movie was from The Dancer Upstairs from Woods, and, you know, got that DVD, and it's a fantastic movie, and it relates very closely. Like, I can see why he took that vocal sample right from that first song. Again, like, it shows a lot what Woods was going through in his life at that time. Parallel of, you know, maybe dealing some drugs at one hand, and also performing and living that double life, and not giving it to you straightforward in a way that you listen to the song first time and you understand what's going on. But if you listen to the cues, you can see what's going on there with it. And there's a lot of that with Woods, and the interview really helped me unlock that yes, there's individual lines you can pull from Billy Woods songs. They're like, oh, that line's amazing, that line's amazing. But every song is like about something, and there's no wasted lines. And sometimes understanding one line in the song unlocks the rest of it, because then you know what he's talking about. And I learned a lot about how to listen to Woods by the interview I did with him for Dour Candy. He has a lot of really intriguing relationship songs and sex songs on this album that you see later in his career, that, you know, maybe a lot of people didn't realize he was making these kind of songs still at this time, but they're there. And there's a lot of themes and storylines on this album that tie into later albums, that once you understand more about Woods and the life he lived, especially in that aughts era, like you can unpack a lot from listening to this album. There's multiple collabs with Elucid on this album, just like Woods guested on the Cult Favorite album, and you can really kind of see the forming of the themes of Arm & Hammer on this song. There's a couple songs that came out, or there's one or two on History Will Absolve Me. There's a couple on mixtapes before that, but themes, you know, not necessarily overtly political, but you have themes about police, you have themes about capitalism. You can just tell that they're challenging each other and writing rhymes that really lift the bar on the content that and the level of depth that they're trying to bring to listeners. And it's no wonder that they wanted to work more together and form a group, because you can hear the chemistry on these songs. I mean, Woods has an A$AP Rock feature on here, which was really a big look for him at that time. There wasn't a lot of rappers of A$AP Rock stature that were like even checking for Woods in like 2013, 2012. There was starting to be buzz around him, but to have A$AP on this album, I mean, obviously Blockhead's a producer and it makes sense, but it was still like a really big look for him. I mean, he has Open Mike Eagle on here too, who wasn't, you know, quite as established as someone like A$AP Rock at this time, but the A$AP Rock feature was a big feature, and obviously they've done a lot of great work together since then. And then at the end of this album, Woods has the song I Bridged the Gap from Marriage Chair to Sweatshirt. You know, at this time, I was a big Earl Sweatshirt fan. It had been, you know, 2-3 years since Earl had broken onto the scene. I don't even know years lining up, like if Earl was back here in America yet or not, but he wasn't aware of Woods, I almost guarantee, at this time. I remember when I first started seeing Earl tweet about Woods, I forget like what year it was, but at this time, like 2013, I think Woods understood, like, I'd love to eventually work with a guy like Earl, hyper talented, and the line makes perfect sense. Like, I bridged the gap from Marriage Chair to Sweatshirt. If you don't understand what that means, do a little knowledge, but yeah, like, these are, you know, writers that are very important and historically important. And Woods understood this early, and it's, you know, again, like the Cult Favorite album, very prescient for him to say a line like that. Yes, this was a big opportunity to make an album with Blockhead. He had like a level of success coming off History Will Absolve Me, but we're still years, at least 5 years away from the type of breakthrough that makes Woods known as the type of artist that he is today. So these things were like so impressive in hindsight. To be that confident in yourself, to understand your place in this music thing. These albums are very, very important to me, and kind of the genesis of, I mean, you know, I've been buying vinyl now for, you know, 2013 to now 2026. My record collection, like, I'm very proud of it, but it hasn't even been that long, not that much longer than a decade that I've been doing this. So anyone who's starting to collect vinyl, like, doesn't matter where you start, just start somewhere. Start with artists that are really important to you. Time passes, you're going to acquire more, but these are records that, in hindsight, very good decisions to buy them and eventually get a record player so I could actually listen to them. But yeah, Billy Woods and Lucid, two of the best. That's all for today. Uncle Benji, till next time, peace out.